as I find myself recovering from my series of overnight shifts and prepping for what seems to be another storm entering the area on New Year's Eve. I had myself thinking about 2020. And then I quickly tried to not think about 2020 because it's horrible, as we all know. But I thought to myself, some good things have happened in 2020, but what do I want to see happen in 2021? So it is Tuesday, and I thought to myself, it would be good as the last Tuesday of the year of 2020. Let me give you my top 10 things that I want from Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, but I guess they're sort of interchangeable, in 2021. So that's pretty much it. I'm Ted. This is Nerd Immersion. We're going to do the top 10 here. It is going to be 10 options. I don't really have much stuff to show you. It's kind of just going to be my opinions, but you all seem to like my opinions on things. So if you want to see what I wish or hope for that we're going to get in 2021, stay tuned. Number 10. Unearthed Arcana. I know we're going to get more, so that's why this is so high on the list, because I know we're going to get some. I just want more now because I want more options. As we've seen this, it kind of ramps up and then slows down. We've seen this in the past. As they're getting or starting to get prepped for a new book, they kind of hit us rapid fire with a bunch of them to get feedback. And we saw that as more and more of the subclasses ones came out. Nothing, I think, was more crazy than it was back in like 2016 when they were prepping for Xanathars, and we got a new Unearthed Arcana like every week for like a month. We got a new one every week or for maybe 2 months to prep for all those subclasses. I just want more. I know we're going to get it. But yeah, I just want it. That's all. Number 9. Better handled community events. We for those of you who are around and happen to catch my like live reaction to what was D&D Live 2020, that was a disaster. I think for the D&D celebration or whatever it was, the one that happened later in the year for Icewind Dale, it was leaps and bounds better. Unfortunately, there was a lot of growing pains associated with the first one, which is fine. It is what it is. But for the fact that like we had D&D like creators with garbage webcams, garbled audio. We had a cooking show, which I didn't think was even necessary, but you couldn't see anything because people were filming from their cell phone. Their bottom third like names covered up what was actually happening. Just a lot of logistical things that I feel like could have been sorted out ahead of time. And the fact that they focused all of their focus was all on celebrities and not on the D&D community. And again, a lot of us out here, not even suggesting myself, because I don't think I'm anywhere near that level to be like called me out as someone who's going to be there. But people that do content creation and that kind of stuff, like we live on the internet to do this for Zoom calls, for all this kind of stuff. We know how to do it. It probably would have been a good idea to bring some folks, even if you're not going to have them present, make content, be a part of it, at least bring them in as a consultant to help like set stuff up and do dry runs and that kind of a thing. Again, I think the one like the D&D celebration where they gave us 2 full previews of subclasses coming in Tasha's, the really cool, fun, interactive Icewind Dale map where secrets are coming out and the whole like ARG, the whole community's got to figure it out together. That was super fun. I loved that. I had a blast playing through that, figuring it out with all of you, making videos nonstop on it. It was amazing. More stuff like that in 2021 will be awesome. Hopefully, maybe we'll be able to do real in-person events in 2021. I don't know. I know PAX is gearing up to possibly have the first event start in June with the hopes that with the vaccine or, possibly just people aren't, I was going to say with people being better, but let's be honest, people aren't going to be any better. It's just really if the vaccine is present or not, or they find a way to just completely destroy COVID. But I'm hoping, again, that would lead to better in-person events as well. Number 8. More props / lifestyle products, whether it be something like this nice D&D branded glowing D20 lamp, things like the Book of Holding, which is just like a notebook to take, just a D&D branded notebook with sweet Hydro 74 art on the front. It's got a magnetic clasp close. And then all it is is just gridded paper for you to take your notes on, and it has a nice pocket for you to put like things in the back here, right? I've always been a fan of like Moleskine notebooks, but these are official D&D branded, so I'm on board for that. Also things like, like there's this little World Builder's Journal, which has little writing prompts at the top of every page, and like to help you figure out your world, this kind of stuff. Or even more proppy things like this. Or for example, we had the crossover with Spirit Halloween where they had all the Drizzt costumes, and you could get the Drizzt swords, and they were kind of a foam. But did you know that supposedly coming out later this year is a full set of what looks to possibly be higher quality plastic and maybe metal Drizzt swords from GameStop? They're only available at GameStop, but they're much higher quality, as you can see from the images here. They are engraved. They also come with the scabbards, which is not a thing that the other ones from Spirit Halloween did. And rather you can see it's nicely detailed. Twinkle actually looks like interesting. It is die-cast metal hilts and polypropylene flex blades with ABS scabbards, because originally it didn't tell us. So the hilts are made out of metal. That's awesome. And then the swords are flex rubber, so you can actually use these if you wanted to LARP with them or not, but they look so much better. I mean, here you can see someone actually holding them. This kind of stuff, right? We're going to get these figures here. This Drizzt figure. This one is actually only available at GameStop. This particular one, which is a stationary Drizzt statue. There's the one we've seen, the sort of articulated action figure coming from Hasbro Pulse. It doesn't necessarily, I just happened to pull GameStop because I knew they had a couple of interesting examples, but more stuff like this, right? I'm in the process of building a new studio for recording these videos in. Not that this isn't an interesting background, but the lighting always seems to be funky, and I need to get a new camera because this webcam keeps just screwing with me. But I'm going to build a new studio. I'm building it right now, and I want to have cool things on the wall, and not everybody wants to spend $300 to $500 on a dragon head from WizKids, but like a glowing D20 lamp for like $20-$30 on Amazon, that's cool. More stuff like that. Number 7. Campaign settings that people actually want. Whether or not, we don't know what's going to happen with Dragonlance with all the back and forth from what we've seen. Apparently, interesting things in the weeks to come, and you can bet I'll be covering it as soon as I find any information on it. But, I don't have anything against the Wizards of the Coast crossovers internally, right? The Magic the Gathering Dungeons and Dragons crossovers. I think that that's fine. I think that that's actually really interesting, and I think that come 6th edition, Magic the Gathering and D&D will be fully integrated from the start. I think that that's just where they're going. But I'd rather not have something like Theros or Ravnica when I don't have something like a true Ravenloft campaign setting, or Greyhawk, or Dragonlance, or Spelljammer, or Dark Sun, or any of these ones that everybody wants, right? I don't even necessarily have one that I'm particularly excited about. I don't need Spelljammer. I can play Baldur's Gate 3, and that's pretty close. But I don't need Spelljammer. I don't need Greyhawk. I don't need something outside of the Forgotten Realms, because I either play with what's existing in the Forgotten Realms, tweak it and make it my own, or just make it my own homebrew world and go from there. But the fact that we're getting, the way people see this is they saw 2020 as that's the year that we got Theros and we got Wildmount, and a lot of people like Critical Role in the Wildmount campaign setting, and that's cool. We have the kind of Exandria or the Tal'Dorei one from years back from Green Ronin for Critical Role, but the way, whether or not this is actually the case, and I don't think it is, most people I interact with on the internet seem to think that because we got Wildmount or because we got Theros, we didn't get something else that they did want. We got Theros and we didn't get we didn't get Spelljammer, or we got Theros and that means we are not going to get Dragonlance. I don't think it's ever been like that, where there's a slot and they're well, we're going to give it to Critical Role, or we're going to give it to Magic the Gathering. I don't think it's ever been like that. That's how people perceive it, because again, they want something and they're not getting it, so they're making a big deal about it. Again, but even if at the very least, just to stop these arguments on the internet, even though I know it won't stop them, right? we could get Spelljammer tomorrow and people will be like, well, we didn't get Dark Sun. And then, that's just how it is. People wanted Eberron. We got Eberron. People got a taste of Ravenloft with Curse of Strahd. Curse of Strahd is not a campaign setting. It is an adventure with some adventure background. A full-blown campaign setting or something dealing with all the domains of dread. Descent into Avernus and Out of the Abyss deal very briefly with the concept of the Abyss and Hell. They're not a campaign setting. They're not a full-blown book on those. Not that I would say you need a campaign setting for Hell, but more lore. That's another one. We'll get to that, the next number here. But campaign settings that people want, give us all the old ones that everybody wants, or just further expand, give us more Forgotten Realms campaign stuff. Like, that's not just the Sword Coast, right? Or, like, again, we got Chult, but Chult was an adventure with a little bit of background. Give us, if you look at the 3.5 material for Forgotten Realms, we had a book for every region that had tons of lore information, and it also had a bunch of other stuff with it too. Monsters, magic items, feats, races, whatever. Not to say we need to go that route because that will lead to a ton of book bloat and people don't want that, but just more campaign setting resources in general, and then again, other full-blown campaign settings. Number 6. So sort of what I was just talking about, more lore, more novels, more canonical stuff for Dungeons & Dragons, right? So I know Wizards of the Coast closed down their publishing house. So they used to have, from what I understand, they used to have internal publishing where they would publish the D&D novels. This would be things like R.A. Salvatore's Drizzt novels. This would be things like the Elminster books. Basically any D&D novel that you found was kind of published through Wizards, and I guess they shut that down at some point, and the only one who's still making books at this point is R.A. Salvatore, because he's a New York Times bestseller however many times over, and his books are like writing money because people will go buy them. Even if you don't love Drizzt or any of those characters, the books still do well, and honestly the books are written well, so I'll fight me, internet. But like I remember I liked the Brimstone Angel series, right, from Erin M. Evans, and her series was really good, and that was like I think published towards the end of 4th edition, or like through 4th edition towards the end of 4th and into 5th. But that was, I think, one of the the last kind of issuance that was going out under the old WotC publishing stuff. More comic books, right? I like the Minsk comic books are interesting. I like those. That's this guy's, right? The Days of Endless Adventure, the Jim Zub one, and these are really nice. I used to like the old Drizzt comic books too. That would go through, like there was the Cutter series of comic books that kind of dealt with the story of Kestea, that magic sword from, again, made famous in the Drizzt books. But then there was also like just graphic novel versions of the Drizzt story. So if you didn't want to listen to it in an audiobook or read it in a physical book, you could get it in a graphic novel. We see this for a lot of other things as well. You might see an illustrated version of a book that, now it's a much bigger book with fancy concept art. I would like more comic books to explain more things in Dungeons & Dragons. If you're going to lead up to some sort of big world-changing event or some interesting thing in the canon of D&D, let's build it up. Let's do comics. Let's do more novels, right, that explain things. Part of my favorite things listening to those or reading those R.A. Salvatore books, either audiobook or reading them, is one, I get to hear how people pronounce things in the world from someone who's, if they're doing it in audiobook form, or two, I can try to get better ideas of how to explain the way a spell or something works in world by trying to use, when someone only has a visual or, a written explanation to explain how things look and you have to visualize it in your mind. If I can figure out how to visualize like Magic Missile based on R.A. Salvatore's description of Magic Missile, then I can use that in my own games to describe Magic Missile to help people understand it. We know there's a movie coming out. I think we'd be better off with Dungeons & Dragons animations, even if it's just like you pay someone to do fun Flash animations on the official D&D account, right? Something along the lines of like what they do with the Penny Arcade stuff for like before Act Inc., like Chris Straub's little animations. Or like a full-blown, you could do an anime. Dungeons & Dragons would work well, I feel like, as like anime, like that style. But it could also be more like a traditional cartoon. You could do a revival of the 1980s cartoon, or I mean, they reboot everything on the internet. Why not reboot the 1980s Dungeons and Dragons cartoon instead of it being an amusement park ride that sucks the kids in to the world of D&D? Maybe it's a video game. Maybe it's a D&D book. I don't know. That could be fun. I don't know. Just more stuff to consume. More content. Number 5. More Tasha's like stuff. And by that, I mean not being afraid to not necessarily openly admit that you made a mistake on something or you overpowered something. But the concept of like, hey, here's a bunch of stuff we think would be cool. Like, it'd be cool if barbarians got a thing at level 7 that lets them, as part of the bonus action that they rage, they get to move. And maybe they get some extra skills, right? Or maybe it would be cool if bards who give out their magic or their bardic inspiration, people could use it to add to the healing of a healing spell, right? Simple things like that, like the optional class features that they added in Tasha's Cauldron, that kind of stuff. Or even the way they handled things with the Ranger, right? Where they had certain options, the replacement class features, where you sub out, you remove this class feature and replace this one. More things like that. Flag them all as optional when you put them in the book so that people don't have to have a shit fit over the fact that they ruined their favorite class, or why are they changing this thing, or this thing's too much, or this thing's not enough. If they're all optional, it's your prerogative to use them in your game as the player or the DM, or the player with the DM's permission. But more options. As I've stated in several videos at this point, I think we're at the point now where 5th edition players, all the new 5th edition players, the new players to Dungeons and Dragons, all those new folks who came into the game, whether it's through Critical Role or the general resurgence and booming of Dungeons and Dragons in general, have gotten to the point now where they're comfortable with more intricate options and more interesting tweaking and messing around with the game. So that's why we got something like Tasha's, which breaks that kind of standard format where you can, hey, just have more stuff, or hey, have these things that you can change in and out. And that, I think, works well because people have gotten time with the game and they're ready to move on. So rather than just hitting you with a shit ton of options right out the gate, they kind of went real slow, and now they're adding stuff in. So more things like that where they're willing to tweak and alter the game and say like, hey, it'd be really cool if we did have something where you could make a ranger, Beastmaster Ranger, use the sidekick rules for their animal companion. Here's how we decided we could allow that. And again, you could figure that out yourself if you wanted to in your own game. But, you know, these kind of rules, these optional rules that let you do other interesting things. You know, we've seen things like this before, right? The optional rule for climbing onto larger creatures. That was in the DMG. The optional rules for falling from Xanathar's Guide. These kind of things that are interesting concepts that add to the game overall, but they're all optional, and you have the option to use them if you like. Number 4. DM resources as a whole. Official DM resources. Obviously, if you're comfortable homebrewing, anything is possible. You don't need resources. You can just make it up. There's a ton of awesome third-party content out there, some of it in published form from well-known folks, some of it in the DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG, and then you can get it for pennies, if not free in some cases. And that's fine, and I do appreciate that, and I have thousands of those resources that I use, and I flip between whenever I'm trying to run a campaign or a one-shot or whatnot. But people, as I've stated in my other recent videos as well, sometimes people don't think it's okay unless Wizards of the Coast says it in a book. Even though a third-party person could come up with an amazing way to handle the crafting system, let's say. And there are great resources for that. Some people will basically live by, if it's not in a WotC published book, it doesn't count and I don't feel comfortable using it. And that's fine. They're the designers of the game, so in theory they know what they're doing, so that makes some sense. But DM resources as a whole are pretty much limited to the Dungeon Master's Guide, which came out almost 6 years ago at this point, and a couple of little blurbs, like in part of like the Heroic Chronicle concept, which is spread across a couple of books, the the little bit of concept about like piety and that kind of thing, which is in Theros, the little bit of DM resources at the end of Tasha's, the little bit of DM resources sprinkled throughout Xanathar's. A straight up DM book would be nice. It doesn't have to necessarily be the Dungeon Master's Guide 2, but it could be, right? And not just like the way DMs pretty much get resources for the most part now is like, here's a book with more monsters in it. And not every DM's like, oh, I'm starving for new monsters. I need a Volo's Guide. I need a Mordenkainen's. Some people just want other interesting mechanics and things like that. And I have a separate video coming out in the new year about that and about why I think we're getting DM resources the way we are and not just getting a dedicated book. But I do think that just first-party DM resources would be a nice thing, even if that's, you know, not having to boot up the 3.5 Deck of Many Things generator on the Wizards of the Coast website. I mean, I still reel by the fact that they took down the official D&D forums off of the Wizards of the Coast website because for whatever reason, they thought that that was a good idea. You know, that was a great resource for a lot of information, and they closed that out years ago. But yeah, more, even if they're web tools like that, like I said, like a Deck of Many Things creator that's 5th edition, updated with the current rules, so I don't have to generate a Deck of Many Things card randomly on the internet through the old the 3rd edition card generator and then convert everything up to 5th edition. Just make my life easy. People will pay for these things too. I'm not saying that I want you to do like paid D&D first party apps on my phone, but you could make paid apps or paid things, paid soundtracks that are DMCA free for folks to use, that for DMs to play music and stuff like that. People will use that. They will be willing to pay for that. It just needs to be put out there. And again, if you're comfortable using third-party options, there's a ton of them. But if you want it from first-party, well, we don't have it. That's why I'm asking for it now. Number 3. In a similar vein to the DM resources, but this I think has more credence for players, it's just a magic item book. That's it. You could call it the Magic Item Compendium, right? We've had that name in the past. You don't have to. You could come up with some other name, theme it after somebody if you need to, right? I don't know, Laurel Silverhand's litany of, I don't know, whatever. You get my point. Give me a book of magic items. And do me a solid and give me a book of magic items with specific magic items for every class. We saw a lot of improvements in Tasha's Cauldron, where we saw a lot of specific items to primarily spellcasters, right? It's Tasha, she's a spellcaster, that kind of makes sense. But it was all resources primarily for spellcasters. Marshals were pretty much left in the dirt. Now, granted, there are a lot of magic items that can be used by martial characters, but there's not a lot of, I don't think there's any monk-specific, barbarian-specific, fighter-specific, or rogue-specific magic items. Most of the other magic items that are specific to a class are tied to the different kinds of spellcasting, which is fine. But like, I would love a cool, like a barbarian-themed belt, axe, anklet, whatever that does cool things for barbarians, right? Maybe a set of key channeling robes for a monk or something, right? Something that raises them. Even if you go similar to what we already got, like where we have all these new books in Tasha's Cauldron and these different things that raise your spell save DC, maybe something for a monk that raises their monk key strike or their stunning strike, their monk level DCs, right? Comes in a +1, +2, +3 variety, and it raises the DC of their monk abilities. Because it's not just stunning strike. Some of them, like let's say for whatever dumb reason you do decide to be a 4 elements monk, you have spells that you can cast. Well, in theory, this would be an item that will let you raise the DCs and the attack rolls of those spells. Or if you have an ability to let you punch somebody and knock them back or knock them prone, similar to an open hand monk. If you are a Sun Soul monk and you sort of have your Kamehameha or your like 5-finger death punch, if you're either an open hand monk or a necrotic punch from a long death monk, all of these options have DCs tied to them, and there is currently no way to do it. Now, yes, I've homebrewed these in my games where you can get an item like this that boosts the DC of your monk abilities, but we've seen this now across the board for all magic users. Why not do it for monks? And if you can think of something similar for fighters, maybe for the battle master, DCs or any fighter-based DCs, right, for Arcane Archer or whatever. Rogues as well. And then I don't know what you would do for Barbarian, but something in a similar vein for them. Put these in the magic item book. Maybe you could do subclass specific magic items that boost certain abilities like Hexblade's Curse or something like that. It boosts that ability. Racial based magic items. I know that might not be like the best thing given the fact that they sort of decoupled races for the most part in Tasha's Cauldron. But you know what I mean? Things like that. Give me them sorted. Give me magic tools. Give me magic vehicles. Give me magic things specifically for pets, for sidekicks, whatever. Sidekick specific magic items. But a whole book that's just dedicated to magic items, or even better, a whole book just dedicated to mundane equipment. Honestly, interesting mundane equipment, new weapon types, new armor types, magical materials to make your weapons out of. Maybe introduce a concept that's similar in a lot of video games to socketing, where you can put a socket in an armor and then put things in said socket that will increase and decrease the abilities of it. Just give us more options for our magic items. That's all. Number 2. An update to the Open Gaming license, especially with the release of both Xanathar's Guide and Tasha's Cauldron, introducing the concept of new spells, introducing an entirely whole new class in the Artificer to base level Dungeons and Dragons, introducing these new mechanics where this kind of custom lineage mechanic and all that kind of stuff. Technically, you can't write the custom lineage where you can kind of write your own, pick up your own ability scores and all that kind of stuff. You can't, if you're making a third-party source that you're planning to either crowdfund or sell or whatever, you can't use the custom lineage, even if it's something that's so simple that so many of us could have just done and have done already. You can't call it custom lineage, and you can't pretty much write it the same way because it's been published by Wizards of the Coast and it's not listed in the open game license or the SRD as something you can actually use. We have all these cool new spells. Again, if you wanted to make in your homebrew book that you're going to crowdsource an Artificer subclass, people need, like, that's not, Artificer is not technically allowed because it's not in the open game license. To me, the introduction of a completely new class and these crazy rules for changing the way races are, you should probably update the open game license. It hasn't been updated in like 3, maybe 4 years at this point. You can make the updates now to get it more in line with what you've got. Assuming you want to continue supporting this initiative going forward, you should up it, make it up to date to current. Number 1. And lastly, transparency from Wizards and Dungeons and Dragons. We have there's been a lot of questions, a lot of speculation about a lot of different things. Just give us just be transparent. Let us know what's going on. Whether that's simple as, here's the schedule for Unearthed Arcana for 2021. We're going to do it once a month. It's going to drop on the 3rd Monday of every month, rather than just like, maybe there'll be one today, maybe there won't. It used to be, they used to have a schedule, right? It used to be the 1st Monday of every month. Then they pushed it back to the 2nd Monday of every month, and then it slowly became to what it is now, which is we'll put it out when we're ready. And that's fine, but it's easier to build around that if you know when it's supposed to come out, especially for someone like me and the others who do content creation. It's nice to know we don't have to drop everything we're doing to make an Unearthed Arcana video because the new one happened to drop earlier that day or that evening. Transparency about what's going on. There's a lot of speculation and people have weird ideas of what's going on with all these lawsuits and dropped lawsuits. And I know some of it's probably you can't explain because of legal reasons, but like a statement explaining things would be nice. Maybe more transparency onto what's coming out. I know you probably don't want to announce certain things until you have production copies of it, like what the next books are. Even if you were to give us a true, not a speculative slate from people trying to find stuff from like Hasbro marketing emails. Hey folks, we're going to release 5 books next year. 2 of them will be Adventure Paths. The other 3 will be to be determined. That's great. Now I know what to plan for in my 2021. Hey, we're going to get 2 new adventures and 3 other books that I don't know what they're going to be. That's cool. We've still been hearing about books that were supposed to come out this year. We have heard about them last year. They haven't come to fruition, so I assume those are coming in 2021. Like the sort of anthology book, similar to Tales of Undermountain and Ghost of Saltmarsh, the sort of anthology adventure manual that was supposed to be written by a bunch of different like celebrities in the D&D community. We heard about that in like November, December of last year. It's supposed to be coming out this year. I think that got pushed, and that's going to be one of the books we get in 2021. But give us some transparency on these kinds of things. Let us know what's going on. Let us know more insight. You give us the surveys, and you give us like 1 or 2 sentences about what the feedback is. Give us like a full-blown feedback. I mean, maybe this isn't for everybody, and that's why they're not devoting time to that. But I'm genuinely curious. Hey, you put out a survey about those dragon-based subclasses you made. What was the general perception of it? Maybe a pie chart. People who liked it, people who didn't like it. Just so I can get an idea of whether or not I'll ever be able to see that class published in a published source, or was it received so poorly it's just going to go into the archives and be lost forever. Again, like I said, I understand that there is a certain degree of anonymity required due to NDA contracts and other things like that, but general transparency would help give people a big warm and fuzzy about Wizards of the Coast if it's just like, oh, hey, yeah, you know, there's been some stuff going on with the Dragonlance creators, and give us your perspective, rather than like, we only are hearing the plaintiff side of this. We're only hearing what folks like me and others are saying about it based on what they're reading. It would be super easy, I feel like, for them to take some time, craft a statement, and release it, and then everybody would at least know where we stand on things. Are you planning a 6th edition anytime soon? I know you keep saying no, probably not. Give us a definitive answer. We're not even going to think about looking into a 6th edition until, 2025. Okay, now I at least know that I have this 5 more years of 5th edition, and that's how it's going to go. That kind of a thing. I don't know. Like I said, maybe these are silly. These are all obviously heavily opinion-based, all of these answers, but these are things that I want in 2021 from Wizards of the Coast / Dungeons & Dragons. Let me know in the comments things that you're most interested for, things that you want to see coming out of this company in the next year or coming years after the fact. Thank you again to my patrons over on Patreon who continue to support me and the channel. Voting for new patron top 10 style videos will resume in the new year. And if you haven't taken a moment to subscribe to the channel and you do like what I do here, like hearing me talk about stuff, give you my opinion and whatnot, well, if subscribing helps me out, it helps you stay up to date on these videos, especially if you're able to turn your notification bell on. I know some people have expressed some problems with that. Others have said nothing, so who knows. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.